So what we're going to do, we're just going to go through the method of pointing. For pointing, we've got a number of different trowels. We've got a finger trowel, and this is the one that we use for these finer joints. We're putting water in on these finer joints. On the larger areas, I'd use this, which is called a small tool. So that will perhaps fill these larger areas here. And then we've got this, which we tend to use more for rubber walling, so quite large sections at a time. So Finn is going to just demonstrate how we're going to do this. So obviously what Finn's done, if we just have a look at your mortar board, we've prepared some on the board at the right thickness that we really want to be working at. Which are you going to go for first?
I'll go for the bed joint first.
Thank you, yeah. So, Finn is experienced at doing this, and even he's using his mortar board quite close to the wall, so, the material's very sticky. It's sticking to that very fine trowel that you've got. If you try to do that with a larger trowel, you would find that you'd get smears on your bricks. So that's just a very neat way of applying it. And you've got the arises, you can see, which is an aris is the corner of the brick that's being kept clean. And if you do go over it slightly, you don't worry about it, you just leave it. Don't try and clean it off while it's wet. Okay. Let that lime just dry off a bit, because at the end of the working day you can come back and you can just run a trowel along that and all the surplus comes off, leaving a clean joint. If you try and clean it off as you go along, you'll find you'll just get big smears either side of your brick, which you really need to avoid. And I know this is a very old wall that's degraded very badly, but if you were doing high status brickwork on perhaps a Georgian building or something, or any kind of building really, you'd find that smears don't look very attractive. They also change the percentage of mortar. So instead of having something like 5% visible mortar, if you fill the joint right the way up and it smears over the surface, you could be up to 25%. So visually the whole wall starts to change. Yes. So you need to be very aware of that, about the finished impact of your repointing work. So you'd probably leave it about there, wouldn't you think? Yeah. So just to the approach on something a bit thicker like this joint here. So he's now switched to the small tool. And again, you can see he's preparing the thickness of mortar on the mortar board before he applies it to the trowel.
Also looking for like a point to the mortar, just to get deep into the crack there. Really work it in there. So you can make a triangle on your hawk there and trim it off. Like so, okay.
And note also that it's not just the action of his right hand, it's also the action of the left hand with the mortar board. You're manipulating the board towards the trowel as well. So there's a double action, left and right, to getting it to stick to your tooling. And now Finn's just using the other end, which is just a rectangular end.
Okay.
That's it. And have we got any work that we can do with a bigger trowel, the pointing trowel? Probably. So it might be an area like this.
That one there, Joe?
Yeah. So we might use a larger pointing trowel. Oh, that one, yes, that's it, yeah. So it very much depends on the mortar joint beds that you're trying to repoint as to which tool you can pick, but just go with one that you're comfortable with. The smaller tools, it's a bit slower, but it might be a good idea to start with the smaller tools. Then we get more confidence, build up with the larger tools. But as I say, again, you can see still got that nice sharp pyramid that just slips in there quite nicely. I wonder if you can just give us a profile of that on the trowel, please, Finn.
Yeah.
So can you see that, how sharp that is? And that'll feed in quite nicely.
Yeah, if it wasn't
full already. Yeah. Now, once you've done that, of course, you're now committed. You've got to look after that. So, particularly on a hot day like today, keep an eye on it. You do want some moisture to leave it so that you can work it. And the next job to do with that, I would say, is compressing it a bit more with your tooling, and then to follow up with a dry brush tamp. So let me just get a dry tamp. So these are churn. We know they're known as churn brushes. This is really to where I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm just going to give you an idea of the principles of this. Can you just knock that corner off for me? Thank you. So once that some moisture starts to leave that, you then get a brush and you would just tamp it. It will take a bit more than that. It's very soft, so that's tamped very quickly. The problem you've got, because it's wet, it's now built up on that brush. If I kept going, I'd end up with that smearing the rest of the brickwork. So you want it where it doesn't accumulate in your brush. As soon as you're at that stage, you can go along and brush tamp your work. And that's leaving a very open texture there. Now, the advantages of that is you've doubled the surface area, perhaps even more than that. So you've got more opportunity for the CO2 to recarbonate the mortar. So you're asking gas to go in there, CO2 gas, which is going to help carbonate it and cure it. So I would leave that, and then at a certain point I might decide to soft brush it, but that's really the finish you're looking for. If you go for something that's very, and it softens it, yeah. You'll quite often you'll see where people want to iron the joint with a tool, so it's very smooth. We have some examples further up of that. The problem with that is there's a very smooth finish where all the fines come to the top. You're really blocking off a lot of opportunity for carbonation. Plus the aesthetic isn't always right. People have a tendency to want to, so that's a good example. They want to weather strike the joint so that it runs off and weathers better, but it is very much on a wall like this the wrong aesthetic, and probably functionally as well. It's not going to work quite as well. And you want it to remember also this wants to evaporate. It wants to take water away from the wall.
Not run at all.
Yes, yeah. So that's almost you're not sealing it, but by polishing the surface with a metal tool, you've reduced the opportunity for that moisture to be wicked out from the masonry and evaporated into the atmosphere, because that's what we're trying to do with lime. We're trying to manage the amount of moisture we've got in that wall.
Yes.
We don't want it there. We want it, after it rains, we really want that to come to the surface, not by the brick, but by the sacrificial element, which is your mortar, which can always be replaced. As you can see, it's far more difficult to replace a brick, and where these have spooled, it's because the moisture hasn't really been controlled properly in this wall. So every opportunity that has for wicking moisture away and evaporating, that's what we're looking for. And of course, the other advantage of using a very soft lime like this air lime is that it's always going to give you that breathability that you want, that vapour to come off the wall, dry it out, give you the flexibility in your masonry. If you were doing this with even something that's more hydraulic, it's not going to be moving the same.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about harder mortars, and you're then going to get differential movement between the soft and the new, much harder mortar. You'll find that you start cracking your masonry in places. So getting the mortar right is very important. Any questions on that at all? No, I've been very thorough, have I?
Very,
It's good, isn't
very.
it? I should do this for a living, shouldn't I think?